Hi, this is Usha. Welcome to Rathod Science classes. Today in this lecture, we are going to see current affairs of 21st August 2021. In this lecture, we are going to see 9 topics which are very much related to UPSC. So let's get started with our discussion and let us see first topic. So before that, let us see some important topics we are going to discuss in this lecture. So first topic we are going to see about the Somnath temple. So this Somnath temple, it is important from our art and culture point of view and even from our ancient history. And next one is Delta variant. So again we need to go for revision regarding this Delta variant. And next one is Zyco vaccine. So recently the Drug Controller General of India gave permission or not for this Zyco vaccine. So we need to look after that. And next one is Nagarhole National Park, which is in news. So we need to know some facts and location of this park. And next one is National Mission for Oil Palm. Okay, edible oil and oil palm. So this is very important from our governance point of view, which comes under GS paper 2. And next one, it is about Geological Survey of India. So this is also very important from your prelims point of view. And the next one is here China 3-child policy. So till now China went for 2-child policy. Now it gave approval for this 3-child. So it is important from international relations, which comes under GS paper 2. And next one is India US trade deal. So in yesterday's lecture we said about background of this topic. Now we are going to see details of this topic. And next one is anti-conversion law of Gujarat. So it is recently seen in news. So you need to know what is that law and what are the issues and some Supreme Court judgments earlier regarding this anti-conversion laws. So these are some important topics now we are going to discuss. So first topic, a title says that reign of terror is never permanent. So this article mainly talking about Somnath temple. So here why our Prime Minister gave this statement. So our Prime Minister mainly concerned about not only our Prime Minister but across the world we are mainly considering about Taliban seizure of power in Afghanistan. So in this context our Prime Minister said that so whenever there is reign of terror is there, it will be never permanent but is temporary only. Okay, so in this regard we want to see about some facts regarding this Somnath temple. This article will be important regarding ancient history and also regarding art and culture, and even we can relate it to international relations also. So now let us try to see context. If you see context, it mainly says that at a time when the world is anxiously concerned about Taliban seizure of power in Afghanistan. Now entire world which is mainly looking at Afghanistan, it is now under control of Taliban. Taliban mainly seized power in Afghanistan. So in this context, our Prime Minister on occasion of launching new projects at historic Somnath temple, he reminded that the reign of terror, the rule of terror is always temporary but it will not be permanent. So this is context. And now let us try to talk about some important details regarding this topic. So our Prime Minister mainly says that destructive and terror forces, they may become dominant but it will be temporarily but not permanent. Okay, so whenever there is destructive power and terror forces have been come into power, so that power will be just temporary but not permanent. So he mainly said this by citing example of Somnath temple. So this Somnath temple was razed and plundered several times in past and resurrected every time with great glory. So because of this, whatever the rule of terror or destructive forces that come into power, that will be temporary in nature but not permanent at all. So this temple was destroyed, its statues were broken, but resurrected again as many times as it was raised, because terrorism can't suppress faith. Okay, so in this context our Prime Minister gave example of Somnath temple. So this Somnath temple was plundered many times. So whenever plundering has happened, next what happened? So there will be resurrection, that means renovation, that is happening every time, and with this renovation that is improving its greatest glory. So now let us try to talk about some facts regarding this Somnath temple. So if you're talking about a Somnath temple, So if you are talking about the Somnath temple, it is a temple of Shiva, that is Jyotirlinga. So this Somnath temple, it is a symbolic representation of Lord Shiva, and it is one of the highly famed pilgrimage destination, which is mainly located at Viraval Port or Prabhas Patan in Saurashtra, Gujarat. And temple, it is mainly positioning in a quite unique manner. So temple, it is positioned in such a way that not a single piece of land is visible from Somnath seashore until Antarctica. So this is a very very important. And if you're talking about history of the Somnath temple, so in AD 2026, Muhammad of Ghazni first looted this temple, and later on this temple was looted by Afzal Khan. He was the commander of Alauddin Khilji, and later on Aurangzeb. So they looted this temple. So one important point that you need to remember here is, so this temple was looted and destroyed as many as 17 times. Okay, so this is important prelims fact. And next, later on, Iron Man of India, that is none other than Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, he was instrumental in construction of this present temple. And later on, the renowned temple architect was Prabhas Chandra. Prabhas Chandra designed it, and the first president of India, that is Dr. Rajendra Prasad, he installed Jyotirling in the new temple. Okay, so after plundering and after destroying this temple, again we went for renovation. Renovation architect was Prabhas Chandra, and after renovation of our first president of India, that is Dr. Rajendra Prasad, he installed this Jyotirlinga in new temple. Okay, in year 1951. So these are the some important prelims facts that you need to remember. Now let us see next topic. Title says Delta variant driving infections in India according to report. So this article mainly says that what are the infections that we are seeing in India which are mainly due to this Delta variant. So now let us try to see context. If you see context, it mainly says that according to weekly update from INSACOG, that is India's SARS coronavirus to genome consortium. So according to weekly update from this INSACOG, so this report mainly says that Delta variant remains most responsible for continuing spread of infections in India. So context mainly says that according to weekly update, INSACOG India SARS coronavirus to genome consortium, which came up with a report. So this report says that Delta variant remains most responsible. Delta variant is most responsible for continuing spread of infections in India. So if we're talking about some important details, which mainly says that according to August 16th report, okay, August 16th report of this consortium, it mainly says that about approximately 50,000 coronavirus samples they were analyzed for genetic composition. So out of this 50,000 cases, about 2/3, that is 30,230, they were among internationally classified variants of concern. So they are variants of concern or variants of interest mainly seen in this 2/3 of samples, that is about 30,000 of samples. And out of these 20,000 of samples, they were confirmed with this Delta variant, and about 5,000 they were associated with this AY1 and AY3. So these are some important details which are given in this article. Now it is time to revise some basics regarding this Delta variant. So we are having Alpha variant, Kappa variant, and Delta variant, and as well as Delta plus variant, right? So here what happened, this article mainly says that the number of increasing of cases which are related to this Delta variant. So if you're talking about some facts regarding this Delta variant, so this Delta variant is also called as B1617.2. Okay, so it is also known as Delta variant. Now this Delta variant is dominant in India. So why it is very much dominant? Because we can see there are about 12 mutations in its spike protein, which we are compared to that of SARS coronavirus 2, which was first discovered in Wuhan in China. So when we are comparing with this SARS coronavirus 2 virus, okay, which was discovered in Wuhan in China in 2019. So compared to that, this Delta variant, which have mainly 12 mutations in its spike protein. So where is the spike protein is present? So here we have genetic material, right? And here we have nucleocapsid. Above that we are having these projections. So these projections are very much responsible for entering of this virus into body cells. So these are called spike proteins. So there are about 12 mutations. There are about 12 mutations in spike protein. And next one is there appear to be more ACE2 enzymes aiding with the entry of coronavirus around these mutations. Whenever we are seeing this mutation which is happening here, so what are the antibodies which already produced in our body, they cannot recognize this thing. So because of this, they easily enter into body, and again that will cause infection. And a study by Public Health England showed that Pfizer and AstraZeneca vaccines, they were only 33% of effective against symptomatic disease of this Delta variant, right? So this is one cause of concern. And if you're talking about virus mutations, so what is the meaning of mutation? So mutation means in simply, so whenever virus which is entering from one person to another person, that is transferring from or transmitting from one person to another person, so whenever it is entering into new environment, it will go for some adaptations or some changes in this genetic material, that is called as mutation. So virus keeps on mutating, and it is a common characteristics of virus. The two variants they were found in India include B16171 and B16712. So they are named as Kappa and Delta variant by WHO in June. And Delta reportedly first found in Amaravati triggered the second wave. And Delta now has another mutation known as Delta Plus. So Delta Plus mutation not found in any other districts of Vidarbha yet. Okay. So these are some important details which are given in this infographic. I took this infographics mainly from earlier newspaper editions. So now let us try to see next topic. Title says ZyCoV-D first vaccine for those who are about to will get not. So this article mainly talking about this COVID-19 vaccine, that is ZyCoV-D. So this article will also important regarding health, which comes under GS paper 2. So now let us try to talk about this topic in a very great detail. Okay, and you can expect a prelims based questions from this topic for sure. So if you say context, why it is in news? Because recently Drug Controller General, the Drug Controller General of India granted emergency permission or emergency approval for this ZyCoV-D. So this ZyCoV-D, it is a COVID-19 vaccine, and this vaccine mainly developed by Ahmedabad based Zydus Canada Group. So Drug Controller General of India granted emergency approval to this ZyCoV-D. So this ZyCoV-D, it is a COVID-19 vaccine, that too DNA based COVID-19 vaccine, and this mainly developed by Ahmedabad based Zydus Canada Group. So this is the first vaccine in India to be administered to adults as well as those who are 12 years and above 12 years. So this is one important prelims fact that you need to know. So if you see some details, it mainly says that it is the only DNA based vaccine. So it is only DNA based vaccine in the world, and it can be administered without any needle. So we are not using needle to administer this vaccine. And in this interim results, it mainly showed that so it is having about 66.6% of efficacy. So these are some important details which are given in this topic. And now let us try to see some facts regarding this vaccine. So this ZyCoV-D, it is a plasmid DNA vaccine which mainly comes under the Vaccine Discovery Program, and this program mainly supported by Department of Biotechnology under National Biopharma Mission. So this ZyCoV-D, it is a plasmid DNA, and it mainly developed under Vaccine Discovery Program. So this program mainly supported by Department of Biotechnology, which mainly comes under National Biopharma Mission. So I want to give you a small homework, so please refer about some facts regarding this Biopharma Mission. So if you don't know about this, please let me know in comment box. In tomorrow's lecture, we are going to discuss about National Biopharma Mission. And if you're talking about what are these plasmids, so plasmids are nothing but they are circular deoxyribonucleic acid. That is, I can say it is a circular DNA vectors. So these vectors are mainly used as these DNA plasmids. Okay, these plasmids, they can be used as a vector that is carrying agent of this virus, such that it will incorporate in immunity in our bodies. So these are some important facts. And if you are talking about application, I said that they are needle free, right? So how can we go for applying of that vaccine? So this Zycov D, it is a needle free vaccine. There is no need of using injections or needles, but it can be filtered by a jet injector. So jet injectors, they are mainly widely used in USA and some other countries. So this allows the vaccines to be injected on the people's skin under high pressure. So at the same time, we can also use needle injectors, but it is not much used actually. So if you're talking about what will be the benefits of this vaccine, so they are needle free. That means it will reduce automatically pain. So it will reduce the pain to the people who is getting it. And next one is there is a risk of spreading the infection. It is much less than the needle injection. Okay. So whenever we are going for needle injection, for example, if I am going to hospital and I am getting vaccine, means I will be protected, but not the people who are around me, right? So if at all we are using these jet injectors and we are spraying this vaccine means, then that will be mainly helpful for large group of people, right? So companies like FarmJet, Spirit International, Valerids Holdings injects Entris Pharma manufactures these jet injectors. So these are some important facts that you need to remember regarding this topic. Now let us say next topic. So I found this image in state page actually. So I found this image is very much interesting and I need to share this with you. So if you're talking about article, it means talking about Nagarhole National Park. So whenever any national park that you see news, you can get a question. You can expect a question from that national park for sure. So this Nagarhole National Park is also known as Rajiv Gandhi National Park. And this park was established as a wildlife sanctuary in year 1955 and was upgraded to national park in year 1988, and it was declared as 37th Tiger Reserve under the Project Tiger. And where this park lies, so this park lies within the Western Ghats in the parts of Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve. So where are these Nilgiris are present? So whenever this Western Ghats and Eastern Ghats, they join at this Nilgiris. And here in this Nagarhole, we can see rivers like Kabini River, which mainly flows, and this Kabini River, which also acts as boundary between Nagarhole and as well as Bandipur National Park. And if you're talking about flora which is seen in this area, so this area which mainly see like moist deciduous forest. Okay, so in this forest we can see plants, trees like teak and as well as rosewood. And if you're talking about fauna, so Asian elephants, cheetal and Indian mouse deer, guar and as well as striped-necked and ruddy mongoose, grey langurs, bonnet macaque and as well as Asian wild dog, leopard, tiger, sleuth bear, etc. They are commonly found in this Nagarhole National Park. Now let us try to focus on map. So here we have Bandipur, right? And here we have Mudumalai National Park and here we have Periyar National Park. Here we can see this Nagarhole National Park will be present, and here river Kabini, which mainly acts as boundary between this Bandipur and as well as Nagarhole National Park. So these are some important things that you need to remember. And now let us try to see next topic. Title says palm oil plan. Palm oil plan enthusiast farmers. So this article especially talking about one important mission, that is National Mission on Edible Oils and Oil Palm. Okay, National Mission on Edible Oils and Oil Palm. So this will be very much important regarding governance point of view and even polity. Okay, which mainly comes under GS paper 2. So now let us try to see this topic in a very great detail. If you see context, it mainly says that the National Mission on Edible Oils, Oil Palm. So it is a project of rupees 11,040 crores. So it is a project of rupees 11,040 crores by Union Government. So what are the important aims? Important aims mainly includes to maximize cultivation and production, and also to bring the remarkable growth prospects in the field of palm oil industry in Kerala. Okay. So if you're talking about this mission, it mainly talks about National Mission on Edible Oils and Oil Palm. So the outlay of this project is 11,040 crore project, and important aim it is to maximize the cultivation and also even production of oil seeds, that is palm oil. And we are also expecting a remarkable growth prospects in the field of this palm oil industry in Kerala. So if you're talking about some facts regarding this palm oil, this palm oil is currently world's most consumed vegetable oil. So across the world, many people they will consume this palm oil. So it is used extensively in the production of detergents and as well as cosmetics and even plastics and biofuels, etc. The top consumers of this commodity includes India, China and European Union. So these are some important facts regarding this palm oil. Now let us try to see about some details regarding this mission. So what is this mission? That is National Mission on Edible Oil Palm. So if we're talking about aims of this mission, so aims mainly includes to harness domestic edible oil prices that are dictated by expensive palm oil importers. So whenever we are improving our palm oil in India, so we need not depend upon the dictating of this price of this palm oil in India. And also we need to raise domestic production of palm oil that can be done by 3 times to 11 lakh metric tons by 2025 to 26. And this will also involve raising the area under the palm oil cultivation to 10 lakh hectares by 2025 to 26 and 16.7 hectares by 2029 to 2030. So these are some important facts that you need to remember. And now let us try to see important features. So the special emphasis of this scheme will be in India's northeastern states and Andaman and Nicobar Islands. So in Andaman and Nicobar Islands and even northeastern states, so we are mainly emphasizing on this scheme because of good weather condition for growth of this palm. And as well as under this scheme, oil palm farmers, they will be provided even financial assistance and will get remuneration under a price and viability formula. So here this oil palm farmers, they will be also provided with financial assistance and also even with remuneration and also some price that will be given. So if you're talking about significance of this scheme, so first and foremost thing here is, so it will leads to decrease in dependence of this palm oil on other countries, and we can also increase the yields of palm in India. So these are the some important facts that you need to remember regarding this topic. Now let us try to see next topic. Title says GSI list geotourism sites in Northeast to visit after unlock. So this article mainly talking about geotourism sites. So this article will be important regarding GS paper 3 under economy, and also you can talk about this GSI Geological Survey of India also. So this article, from this article you can expect some prelims based facts, and this will be important from your prelims. So now let us try to see context. If you see context, it mainly says that Geological Survey of India, that is GSI, which has identified certain geological sites. Okay, so these geological sites which are seen across northeast for promotion of geotourism, as some states in the region they prepare to unlock from September. So many states they prepare to unlock from September. So because of this, they want to go for boost of their, they want to give some boost to their tourism sector. So recently here Geological Survey of India, which has identified certain geological sites across northeast mainly for promotion of geotourism, as some states in the region they prepare to unlock from September. So if you see some details, it mainly says that Sikkim has already opened for tourists, and Assam and Nagaland they are preparing to withdraw this COVID-19 restrictions from September, such that it will give some boost to this ecotourism sector. And 12 locations in northeast are included in 32 approved geotourism or geoheritage sites. So 12 locations in northeast they are including in 32 approved geotourism or geo-heritage sites in the country. So out of this, 12 locations are mainly seen in states like Meghalaya, Assam, Tripura, Arunachal Pradesh, Manipur, Mizoram, Nagaland and Sikkim. Now let us try to talk about some facts regarding this GSI, Geological Survey of India. So from this part you can expect prelims question. So here GSI was set up in year 1851 and primarily to find coal deposits for railways. Mainly to find coal deposit for railways, so it was set up in 1851. So in 1853 the first train, okay, that is between Mumbai to Thane was operational, came into picture. So mainly to find out coal deposits for running of railways, so this was set up in year 1851. Over the years, it has not only grown into repository of geoscience information, but it also attained the status of geoscientific organization. It also achieved the status of geoscientific organization of international repute. The main functions of this GSI includes creation and updation of national geoscientific information and mineral resource assessment. And if you see, headquarters located in Kolkata, and it has 6 regional offices which are located in Lucknow, Jaipur, Nagpur, Hyderabad, Shillong and Kolkata. So at presently here GSI, that is Geological Survey of India, which mainly attached to office of this Ministry of Mines. So these are some important things that you need to remember. Now let us see next topic. Title says China formally passes 3-child policy into law. So this article mainly focusing on this 3-child policy of China. So this will be important from international relations, which mainly comes under GS paper 2. So now let us try to talk about this topic in a very great detail. So if you see context, it mainly says that China's legislature formally amended country's family planning rules, and under these rules now it allowed couples to have 3 children. So earlier Chinese has a 2-child policy, but now recently Chinese legislature amended the country's family planning rules and it allowed couples to go with 3 children because there is declining of demographic transition or decreasing of population or decreasing of birth rate which is seen in China. And next one is, in this context, China also announced a number of policy measures, and these policy measures mainly aiming to boost declining birth rates in China. So if you see some details, it mainly says that, so even government of China took some supportive measures, including those in finances, taxes, insurance, education, housing and employment, mainly to reduce the burden on families as well as the raising cost of children and education facilities. So this is one important good move which is taken by Chinese government, and the changes come in a wake of COVID, China's once in 10-year population census. So for every 10 years it will go for population census. So in that population census, so this is the decision which is mainly taken by Chinese government. And next one is the National Bureau of Statistics mainly said that on May 11th that 12 million babies were born last year, and it is a very much lowest. That means we can see there is decreasing of birth rate in China, that is evident here. So now let us try to see next topic. Title says reboot or reset. So this article mainly focusing on India-US trade deal. So if you see central theme of this topic which mainly says that with Indo-US trade deal off, it is a time India to reorient its global economic engagement. So this article mainly focusing on this India-US trade deal. So background of this article we already discussed in our earlier lecture, that is yesterday's lecture. So first let us try to see context. So if you see context, it mainly says that now at present Joe Biden's administration of US, they said that they are no longer interested. They are no longer interested in securing a bilateral free trade agreement. So they don't want to come up with a free trade agreement with India. So now let us try to understand what is this free trade agreement. So this will be important from your prelims. So if you're talking about this free trade agreement, they are commonly arrangements between 2 or more countries. So they are arrangements between two or more countries or any trading block. So and so block here. So under this trade, they will agree that to reduce or to eliminate or to completely remove custom tariffs and as well as non-trade barriers on substantial trade between them. So whenever there is substantial trade is happening between them, so this FTA mainly says that there will be no or eliminating of custom tariff and as well as non-tariff barriers, and even they are going to reduce this tariff under this FTA. So FTA normally will covers goods, okay, for example agricultural goods or industrial goods, or even trade in services like banking services, construction, training, etc. And here this FTAs, they can also occur other areas such as intellectual property rights and as well as investments, government procurement and as well as competition policy. So these are mainly included in this free trade agreement. And now let's come back into article. Now let us try to see what is the significance. So as you all know, India it is the largest trading partner with US, and with US we are having trade surplus. So trade surplus means number of exports it is more than that of imports. So because of this thing, whenever we are not having any free trade agreement with USA, so we will face some challenges. So impact will be seen on India. So in this context, what is the need? What government can do? So government need to focus on the market access issues on the both the sides, and even they need to talk about low and as well as non-tariff barriers, and they need to also talk about mutual recognition pacts between India and China, and also it mainly talking about adopting common quality standards. Okay, so whenever these steps are taken by India, that will finally boost our Indian exports. So recently on Friday, Indian US envoy came to India and we had a meet. So in that meet, he said that so they are mainly aiming at $500 billion bilateral trade vision. Okay, so if you see here, mainly to achieve this goal, we are having some concerns. So next 3 to 4 points we are going to discuss, that is about concerns. So first important thing here is India already removed from this generalized system of preferences, that is GSP status. So earlier India used to have this GSP status that will reduce the import cost and tariff barriers, non-tariff barriers. But here India removed from this GSP generalized system of preferences. And next one is India's Atmanirbhar Bharat campaign. So this campaign has further exacerbated that view. Okay, so it will be mainly focusing on protectionist and as closed market projects. So when we want to go for outside of this, we are not going to see. So this will be also one important challenge. And next one is trade policy cannot be perpetuated in isolation, but you are also focusing on investments, but investments are very low now in this global pandemic. And we also walked out of this RCEP, Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. So in this context, India needs to demonstrate to its potential FTA agreements, which are including European Union and as well as UK. So what is the impact? So what will the impact here is, whenever India it is mainly creating some vacuum means, so this vacuum will be filled by China. It is an alternative to China in this post-COVID-19 world. So to avoid this, India needs to take some several steps mainly to resolve this issue. So this is gist of this topic. And now let us see next topic. Title saith faith and marriage. So before saying this, I want to make a small announcement on this platform. So if you want to clear UPSC 2022, we came up with one excellent, highly beneficial course, that is current affairs package along with the mains answer writing practice. So how this course will be useful? So one thing you need to remember here is, so here before entering into examination hall, you need to know at least 1.5 years current affairs. And this is right time to join this course to cover this 1.5 years current affairs in a comprehensive manner. And next one is mains answer writing practice. So many students mainly ignore this mains answer writing practice, but this mains answer writing practice also plays an important role to clear your UPSC mains. And next one is, if you join this course, we also conduct prelims test on every Sunday, and we provide you video explanation part. So in this way, this course which is designed as per demand of UPSC. So finally, I want to say one thing: please don't take this course as a choice. Try to join this course as soon as possible and achieve your dream of clearing UPSC. So details of this course which is given in description box. Okay. And if you want to talk to me directly, you can call to this number 8074765513. Now let's come back and let us see this article that is about faith and marriage. So this article mainly talking about interfaith marriages. So now let us try to understand this article in a very great detail. So if you see context, it mainly says that recent anti-conversion laws which mainly enacted by different states is a criminalization of interfaith marriages. So what happened recently, we are seeing number of states like UP and as well as even recently Gujarat also came up with this anti-conversion laws. So these anti-conversion laws, they are mainly enacted by different states. Okay, it is a criminalization of interfaith marriages. So why it is in news? Because recently Gujarat government has defended its anti-conversion law in the High Court, saying that marriages cannot be tool for forceful conversion. So whenever anyone religion, for example, Hindu person who want to marry Muslim or Muslim person want to marry Hindu, then what happened, that will leads to conversions. So here Gujarat government mainly defended that. So this anti-conversion law. So whenever they are converting from one religion to another religion, so High Court mainly said that marriages cannot be tool for forceful conversions. So if you see details, it mainly says that the High Court, okay, the High Court is hearing two petitions that have been challenged recently regarding newly enacted amendment in the law. So this newly enacted amendment which mainly leads to forcible religious conversions through marriages. So it is mainly talking about forceful religious conversions that is happening through marriage. So in this context, High Court observed that an amended law which mainly keeps a sword hanging over interfaith couples because it has created an impression that interfaith marriages are not punishable or not permissible in the state. So here court mainly observed that the amended law regarding this anti-conversion law which mainly keeps a sword, okay, which mainly leads to hanging over interfaith couple. So if you're talking about recent act, the name of that act is Gujarat Freedom of Religion Amendment Act. Gujarat Freedom of Religion Amendment Act of 2021. So if you're talking about some important provisions, it mainly says that it proposes punishment of 3 to 10 years in a jail for forcible and fraudulent religious conversions through marriage. So first important point which mainly said in this act here is, so there will be punishment of 3 to 10 years in jail for forcible conversions through marriage. And as well as it also amends Gujarat Freedom Religion Act of 2003. And the amendment mainly aims to reduce emerging trend where women are lured to marriage for the purpose of religious conversions. So these are some important provisions of this act. And if you're talking about some issues, the first one is, so this amended law which is having some vague terms which are against basic principles of marriage and as well as right to propagate, profess, practice religions which is enshrined in our fundamental rights, that is in Article 25 of Indian Constitution. And this law even allows distant family members to file a criminal complaint. So this is also one cause of concern. And if you're focusing on the Supreme Court judgment which have happened earlier regarding these conversions, so first one here is states and courts. Supreme Court said that states and courts, they do not have any jurisdiction over adults' absolute right to choose a partner. So to choose a partner, there is no role should be played by states and as well as courts. And next important case here is Salmat Ansari Priyanka Kaur case. So in this case, Supreme Court or High Court mainly said that right to choose a partner or to live with a person of choice, okay, it is a part of our fundamental rights which comes under Article 21. We cannot violate this. And what is the need? What can be done? So first one is we need uniformity. So if you're talking about Article 18 of not Indian Constitution, but it is of Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So Article 18 of Human Rights Declaration which mainly says that right to freedom of religion which also include changing of their faith. And second thing that we can do here is states, while enacting anti-conversion laws, they should not put any vague or ambiguous provisions for the people who wanted to convert them on their own will. So on their own will, whenever people want to convert, state should not keep any force. Okay. And next one is anti-conversion law also need to include a provision to mention a valid step for conversion of this minority community institutions. So the anti-conversion laws also need to include a provision. Okay, so in this provision they need to come up with a valid steps for conversion by minority community institutions also. And this one is people also need to be educated about the provisions and ways of forceful conversions, inducement of allurement, etc. So these are the some important steps that can be taken. I hope it is clear, right? So by this we are concluding today. I hope you enjoyed this lecture. And one more thing here is for the PDF of this lecture, you can join the Telegram channel, the link which is given in description box. And please don't forget to subscribe and share and like and comment my videos. Thank you so much.